Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas and in the Dharma and the Sangha. By the merit of accomplishing the 6 perfections, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas and in the Dharma and the Sangha. By the merit of accomplishing the 6 perfections, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. At the beginning of every period of meditation, imagine your root guru sitting on a lotus and moon seat above your head. His body is made of light, radiant, and face happy and smiling as they regard all beings with non-referential compassion. In the guru, all root and lineage gurus are present. With intense respect and devotion, recite the lineage prayer if you wish, but we're going to skip the lineage prayer this evening and go straight to the Guru Yoga prayer. I pray for your blessing, my guru, great and completely worthy spiritual friend. I pray that you will cause love, compassion, and bodhicitta to arise in my mind. I pray for your blessing, my guru, great and completely worthy spiritual friend. I pray that you will cause love, compassion, and bodhicitta to arise in my mind. I pray for your blessing, my guru, great and completely worthy spiritual friend. I pray that you will cause love, compassion, and bodhicitta to arise in my mind. Then, imagine that your guru descends through the aperture of Brahma at the top of your head and comes to sit in your heart in a pavilion of light, like an open shell. This exercise in intense respect and devotion is known as Guru Yoga. It is important to begin every period of meditation in this way. And now we'll sit quietly for just maybe 2 minutes in quiet sitting meditation, observing the breath as it comes in and goes out. So we'll just sit for a couple of minutes. Sitting comfortably in meditation posture, your hands palm downward on the legs, chin tucked in slightly, eyes either closed or cast downward, gazing generally before you. Beginning with the internal motivation that you're going to meditate on breath awareness for the benefit of yourself and others. Taking 1 deep breath, breathing out, and then allowing the breath to come and go naturally, being aware of the breath as it comes and goes. So we'll sit quietly for just a moment or two. Okay, thank you. So welcome to the final meeting of Book Club, Transforming Emotions Book Club. We did 6 weeks on the book, The Great Path of Awakening by Jungpan Khantrul the Great. And my hope is that during the 6 weeks of the class that you were able to read through the book and the great footnotes, and also to practice the Tonglen meditation on compassion and love. And now I wanted to devote the first part of the session this evening to any questions you might have about the practice. You can either write the questions down in chat, or you can unmute your microphone and start by saying your name and what your question is. Let's see if there are any questions in chat. There's 2 questions in chat. There are 2 questions. First, there is the slogan, regard all phenomena as dreams. The scope of this slogan is still a bit tough for me to grasp. Are dharmas, thoughts, physical feelings, all appearances like the vase in on my shelf? Yes. So if we look at the 4 slogans that began in the 2005 edition, if we look at this, starting with page 10, at the bottom of page 10, he places it in context of a session of meditation. So Jamgon Khantrul explains on page 10 that the 4 slogans that follow on page 10, starting on page 10, look like the first one is look at all experience as a dream. And so if you look on page 10 at the very bottom, he says it has a heading meditation. It has the heading meditation. And so I'll read from page 10. With respect to the first topic, after the practice of Guru Yoga described above, you should sit with your body straight, and as you breathe in and out, count without disturbance 21 breaths over and over again. This exercise will render you a suitable vessel for meditation practice. And then, so that's what we would start with a little bit of quiet sitting meditation to calm the mind. Afterward, he introduces a sequential meditation that has 4 parts. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. And they're the next 4 slogans. The first slogan says, look at all experience as a dream. What he says is, what we experience, that is the world and its inhabitants, are objects we grasp at with our senses. So that includes the vase over on the table, the wall, the trees, other people, and so on. What we experience are the external objects. So Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, when he taught about this, he differentiated between what are called apparent objects, such as the tables and the trees and people and so forth. Those are apparent objects that are made of matter. And then appearances, which are how these things appear in our mind. You can argue that the table over there might actually not be the way it appears to be. In other words, it's made of atoms and molecules, and according to science, that table over there is mostly empty space. But if we wrap our knuckles against the table, we'll still hurt them because there is still enough solidity there to cause pain when we strike the table. So it exists, but not in the way we think it exists. Nevertheless, that table appears in our mind. And so the table that appears in our mind is called an appearance versus the apparent object, the thing out there, such as the vase and other people and all of those things. Those are called apparent objects, but appearances are how that appears in our mind. You can do an example with this by imagining seeing the table with your eyes, closing your eyes, and then imagining the table. You know that the table you've imagined in your mind is a mental appearance. The table in your mind is not made of atoms and molecules. And if you tried to wrap your knuckles against the imaginary table, you wouldn't hurt yourself because it's a mental experience. And if you went to sleep and dreamed the table, that appearance of the table in your dream, you would know that was a mental appearance also. But what Jamgon Khantrul is saying here is that the appearance of that table in your mind, even while you're awake, is actually an appearance in your mind that is not made of anything except your mind. It's your mind is experiencing an appearance of that table. The table in your mind is not made of atoms and molecules. It's an appearance as opposed to an apparent object. And so what Jamgon Khantrul says, he says these appearances, meaning the appearance in our mind, are simply our mind's manifestation of confusion. In other words, if we think there's a solid table in our mind, we are mistaken. And so he says, in the end, these appearances in our mind are not actually existent in any way whatsoever, but are like the appearances in a dream. By thinking along these lines, train yourself to have some feeling for looking at the world in this way. So the instruction of this first slogan, part 1 of a 4-part meditation, is that we are instructed to see the phenomena around us as possibly not existing in the way we think they exist, but definitely the appearances of those objects in our mind do not have solidity. So that's the first thing he's asking us to do. And so the second slogan, he says, should you wonder if the mind that is experiencing the appearance is real, then second part is examine the nature of unborn awareness. So he says, when you look directly at the presence of mind, the mind that's experiencing that table, you can't see the color of that mind. You can't see the shape. You can't see the form. You can't see where it begins. You can't see where it ends. And you can't see where it currently resides. This requires us to make a change in what we look at. Usually, we're very fixated on everything that's outside of our body. We're looking at that table or that person or that thing. We're almost always looking at something outside. But this phase of the meditation, phase 2, asks us to turn our attention inward and look at the mind that's having the experience of seeing all these things. And when you look at the mind that's experiencing all these things, you can't see that it has a color. You can't see that it has a shape. You can't see that it has a beginning or end. And so the instruction is, when you look for the color of the mind and can't find it, then you rest quietly for a moment in that experience of not finding. Then you move on to the next one. If there's no color, look for the shape. Round, square, triangle. You'll see that the mind doesn't have a shape either. And then you rest in the experience of not finding that. And in this way, you work all the way through the 6 questions: color, shape, form, location, beginning, and end. And what I did was I took a pencil and I marked A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. And then I would actually look for each of these things in turn. And when I didn't find them, I would practice resting the mind in that experience of there not being something. And this is a brief moment, those few seconds where you don't find something. That's actually meditation, according to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. It's very brief, very short, but it is meditation. And so gradually we build these up and get to the point where, when we go to phase 3, it says, let even the remedy release naturally. That's at the bottom of page 11. He says, when you look right at the essence of the remedy itself, that is, these thoughts about the absence of true existence, there's no reference and it releases naturally. Rest in this state. And so even the thought, what color is my mind? Even the thought, what shape is my mind? If you look at the thought itself, it disappears. And then you can rest in not having seen the thought and as an object. And then the 4th one at the top of page 4, the 4th of the 4 parts of this meditation is just rest. Just rest in the nature of all, the basis of everything. He says, this instruction presents the actual method of placing the mind. When there is no involvement with the activity of the 7 groups of consciousness, and we didn't get a chance to discuss this in detail, but when we're not involved with the 5 senses, if we're not involved with thinking, if we're not involved with the sense of I or me, our mind doesn't stop. If we rest and look at the mind like that, the mind doesn't go unconscious. It still experiences itself. And it says, there is still the nature of all phenomena, the natural state, which is the basis of everything. In other words, this mind is where all of these things appear. He said, it is pointed out by the term noble Buddha nature. Let go and rest without the slightest idea of a nature existing as something, with absolutely no mental clinging, in a state distinguished by non-discursive clarity and pure simplicity. In summary, for as long as you are able, follow no train of thought, but rest evenly in a state in which mind in itself is clear and free of discursiveness. Even if it just lasts a few seconds, it's genuine meditation. Then complete the period of practice with the 7-branch prayer, as you did previously. And so you would then read the 7-branch prayer as the conclusion. So I am hoping, did this address what you were thinking of, Tom, when you asked that first question about?
It did.
It did? Okay, very good. Does anybody else have a question about this sequence of 4 slogans? Did anybody try it? Few people? 1, 2, 3, 4, just a few? Okay, cool. Yep. Any questions about it? Okay. All right. Well, anyway, so if you want to unmute yourself to ask a question, you will have to go to the little microphone that has a red slash through it and touch that. And then you will be able, I think you'll be able to unmute, because I just heard somebody do it, so. So the second question was, do you know if there is a Pecha version of this practice and list of the 59 slogans? There is a Pecha form of it, but the 59 slogans are not listed. Lama Tashi Dundup at Karma, it's either Karma Tekshin Zopsal Ling, KTZL. KTZL in Toronto sells a version of this. And I'll try to get the link to it and put it in the summary email that I send out tomorrow when I send out the link to the video of this session. Because I'll be sending you out the video of this session tomorrow, and I'll put the link to get the Pecha, the Tibetan book form of it. It has a lot of prayers in it, but it doesn't have the 59 slogans. So sorry about that. Then here's a question. I would be grateful for more guidance on navigating political discussions. Oh, yes. Without blaming or judging others. Oh, yeah, boy, that's a tough one. I think we have to look at the root of all blame and the root of all judgment, which is our own self-concept. We have a concept of ourselves. And I know that in lectures when I've talked about this before, we have an experience of our mind and we jump to a conclusion that that mind belongs to someone, and that someone is me. Each of us has this I or me that we ascribe all of our thinking to, and we identify that as being the person who does this, or who likes this, or who dislikes this. And all of these as self-definitions can cause us happiness or suffering, and sometimes both. And so we have this sense of ourself as being separate and different from other people, But for some of us, we sometimes think of ourselves as being inherently better than other people, or smarter than other people, or more principled than other people. And when we begin to compare ourselves to others, we're either worse than others, we're the same as others, or we're better than others. When we start making these comparisons and identifying with them, this is where we get into some trouble, because then we develop habits of thinking. And so one of the things that happens is that these days people they actually treat politics as though it were a religion. And I think that in the same way that religious discussions often devolved into fighting in the past, now people, because they've taken politics as their religion and self-identity, they have now ascribed good and bad to all of these people. And yes, some actions are bad. And it doesn't mean that we have to say, oh yes, all those bad actions are good. We're not being asked to do that. We're being asked to question our instant hatred. Because you see, what's interesting is it's not the person that's the problem, it's what they do that's a problem. And it's actually our negative reaction to them that is actually the problem. Because we may judge them to be unprincipled or wrong, and that's why we have investigators, and that's why we have courts, and that's why we have laws, in order to punish those who do wrong. And so when we get involved in conversations with people, unfortunately, we often cast ourselves as the judge, and we judge them, and usually there is some kind of execution. But, you know, like we'll yell at them, or we'll call them names, or something of that ilk, or we'll even just sit and think badly about them. Oh, that bad person. Oh, that bad person. Oh, that bad person. And we don't recognize that this is not a victimless crime. We think, well, I'm just being principled. Those other people are evil. I'm just being principled. But what happens is anything that we do that allows us to continue hatred is actually self-violence. We're doing violence against ourselves. Because as Trungpa Rinpoche said, we make a little mistake about anger and outrage and rage, thinking that it makes us smart, and that it makes us strong, and that it makes us justified. But when it really, all it does is it sort of poisons us, because if you know about cortisol, the stress hormone, people who artificially engender rage over and over again, they're slowly poisoning their system. And so we have to find ways to not do that. And so one of the ways to do it is by using the slogans in the book, where it says, drive all blame into one, meaning when you start to blame, notice it. When you start to blame externally, notice that you're blaming externally, and ask yourself, is this really smart? Is this really going to help me? Is this going to be the way that I make my body and mind more healthy? And the answer usually is no. And so then there are two remedies. At that moment, when you're feeling the anger and the hatred and the rage, you can actually take a breath and breathe in, and then breathe out. And when you breathe in, you think you're removing all of the negativity from the whole world. And when you breathe out, you think you're giving goodness to the whole world. And you can do that for yourself as well. I breathe in and remove my anger, and I breathe out and give myself healing. And you can also use the 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue slogan by thinking, may my anger contain the anger of all beings, and by my going through this, may I and all beings be free of this anger. And may we all become Buddhas, which is the complete freedom from anger. Again, we're not asking people to say that bad things are good. We're not asking people to not put criminals in jail. We're asking them to question their hatred, and not just accept their hatred and say, yes, that's good. I'm glad I have hatred. which is what happens frequently. So I'm interested in hearing if anybody else has a different view. Are there other thoughts about this? No other thoughts about this?
Mama Kathy, if, while people are thinking about that, I have a quick follow-up question.
Sure.
So I've been trying to really work on this and trying to notice when I'm having an angry reaction and blaming and judging.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been trying to hook into also some other things I've learned about nonviolent communication, thinking about, okay, so if I'm with this is part of the problem is that my work and my family, everybody's obsessed with politics, right? So I find myself in the middle of these things every day. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to use tools like, okay, if people are talking about a certain policy or even a leader as being very dangerous, I'll say something like, it feels so forced sometimes, but I hope I'll get better at it. I feel sad or concerned when such and such a person does this action, does this thing, and because I worry that it'll affect people in a negative way, and it sounds kind of stilted, and people are looking at me like, what kind of drugs are you on? We just want to be angry. I don't know, but I don't know if that's like political gossip. Am I engaging in like another harmful use of my powers of speech by gossiping? Is that gossiping or being overly, I don't know.
I know. I think, what they say is that meaningless talk is a problem for us because it's at least a time waster. Meaningless talk is at least a time waster and can actually be encouraging negativity. So, but if you're trying to have a conversation that's de-escalating a situation, then I don't see that as gossip. I just see that as, because that's because each of the 10 non-virtuous actions has an opposite. So the opposite of meaningless talk is to talk about worthwhile topics in a gentle manner. So, I'd say that de-escalation is probably a useful thing.
I'll keep working on it.
I know. I'm so, don't be too hard on yourself. These are very difficult times because we have this crisis, this existential crisis of COVID-19. And the fact that people are actually carrying a lot of interior anxiety about COVID, and they're carrying a lot of internal anxiety about their finances and their children and their parents. They're carrying a lot of this interior thinking, and it's actually impacting how they feel. And they'll get a little bit more rough with their speech, and they'll get a little bit more reactive, so I think that, so again, don't be too hard on yourself, and mostly just say, I'm going to get better. I'm going to get better. Because you are. Every time you sit and think before saying something, there's benefit in that.
Yeah, and that leads into that quick testimonial that I mentioned to you the other day, which is I had, if it's helpful to anyone or just for purposes of sharing, I found out that my identity was stolen about a week ago, and somebody had applied for unemployment benefits in my name and in my social security number, which is scary. But that this helped me so much because I immediately caught myself right away as soon as I found out. It was really interesting to watch my mind because it wanted to spin all these stories about what a victim I was and this other person did something terrible to me and blah, blah, blah. And I was, because of these teachings, I was able to catch it before it spun out. And it just was really interesting to just kind of be the observer and just take a step back and watch the stories reinforcing my ego and stuff like that. And anyway, I just wanted to say how helpful it was. And I did kind of let myself spin a little bit over the week a couple of times as I would get more frustrated with all the paperwork and everything. And I was joking with Mama Kathy that I had to pull out the "at least I won't be baked or roasted," which I love. And it actually, I find it so,
right?
Sorry.
You guys remember that from last week,
yeah,
right?
I won't be, and but it stopped me. It did. I was like, well, at least I won't be baked or roasted. And then I just started laughing because it's so funny. And then that finally stopped. That I was able to catch myself with that. So anyway, it was brilliant. So it really is a life changer. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I asked Tanya to share that because it really touched me that and what I had said at the very beginning was that I hope that other people would have these little aha moments, you know, and that they would have like a little aha moment when they used the practice and it actually helped. And that's my hope, is that by using it, even if you use it just once in a day, that the more you use it, the more it will become part of your life, because it was the intention of the author of this book, the 12th century author Chikawa Yeshe Dorje, as well as the 19th century author Jamgon Khantrul the Great. It was their intention that this practice be taken by the practitioner as a practice that they do for their entire life. And you can see how that is possible, because learning how to live in love and how to learn how to let go of negative mental afflictions is just such a cause for empowerment. It's a cause for hope. It's a cause for a feeling of constructiveness, because no longer do we have to be afraid of our mental states. We can actually begin to engage with the mental state, and we may not be able to transform that mental state instantly, but at least we will change how we experience the mental state. And hopefully that will give us some encouragement to continue to work with it. So thank you. I like I say, I did ask you to share that, so thanks. Does anybody else have questions about? Yes, I see Charles is waving. Yes.
This is about Tanya's statement. I missed exactly what she said. She said that she wouldn't be, and then I missed. She said I wouldn't be roasted. I wouldn't be.
Oh, wouldn't be baked or roasted. Yes. Yeah.
Roasted. Okay. Now, what is that in reference to the slogans?
You want me to explain that, or do you?
Yes, please.
I'll tell you where it is. And
missed that last week because I don't remember that.
Yeah, it's from last week, actually. It's on page 46. Page 46, and go ahead and tell us, Tanya, why you engaged it.
Yeah, I was just kind of having an emotional wave, and I was at my, just the normal tools to slow it down weren't working fast enough. So I was feeling sorry for myself and getting frustrated, and then I caught myself, fortunately, and I said, well, this terrible thing is happening and it's really frustrating, but that's great. I was like, fake it till you make it, right? I was like, that's great, because, all this bad karma's coming to fruition, and now I won't have to, it won't be a cause be going to hell in the future, so I won't be baked or roasted in hell. Yay.
Yay.
I'm glad I asked. That's great.
You're glad. I know, because basically, as I've mentioned, when I was talking about the genre, we'll call it the genre of mind training literature. The genre of Tibetan mind training literature is filled with these kinds of like extreme examples. I mean, they use, the authors use exaggeration and irony to get our attention. They almost speak in a confrontational way to get our attention and to drive home the points that they're trying to make. And so what he's saying here at the bottom of page 46, he says, when your mind is all riled up, think, when I am in this kind of mood, my mat, meaning meditation seat, is by far the best place to be. This present, nasty, mental state is fine, meaning, and moreover, by putting up with this unpleasantness, I won't be born in the hell realms. How wonderful. I won't be baked or roasted. How wonderful. And I mean, I know it's exaggerative. It's difficult to think about those kinds of things. But by using this exaggerated language, we're asked to at least come a half step closer and say that when we feel discomfort in this lifetime, when we feel discomfort, it is our negative karma coming to fruition now in this life, while we can deal with it, while we can use dharma to transform it, rather than waiting until a future lifetime when it might come up then. Recently, I was talking to one of my Dharma friends, and she said, yeah, I heard, Lama Kathy, I heard that you were sick, really sick back in 2018, and you had pneumonia, and you were like super ill, and this, that, the other thing. And I remembered thinking to myself, man, she must be burning up some negative karma. She must be trying to get through it all during this lifetime. And I said, would that would be true. I mean, would that would be true. Because, but I'm Kempo Rinpoche said it takes a lot of courage to say, I'd like to have it all this lifetime, please. Anyway, but I'm not quite there yet, but anyway. So thank you for sharing that. And thanks to Charles. I think there you are. Thanks for asking about that. Any other questions about this? Okay, we'll go on to Chuck's question. He's asking about the formal refuge prayer. Yes, the formal refuge prayer that we do at the beginning of the Lojong practice is here in the Lojong practice booklet. And if anybody has the PDF, if you could attach it in chat, that would be like super swell. If you can't, that's okay. I'll make sure, Chuck, that you get a copy of it. But the refuge prayer is like, I don't know, maybe it's 4 pages in. And it says, until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas and the Dharma and the Sangha. By the merit of accomplishing the 6 perfections, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Because it's important to start with a refuge prayer. And I'm guessing that the author of the book just assumed that everybody would be citing one. And so, because it's always at the beginning of every Tibetan sadhana. In fact, the English that I just read to you is one of the English translation of the 4-line refuge prayer that's recited at the beginning of the Chenrezig sadhana, the one that goes Sanje Chudan Sochi Chonam La Jangchu Bardu Dani Kyapsuchi Daji Jinso Jipe Sonam Ki Drola Penshir Sanjay Drupar Show. So that's this prayer that's on this page. So that's why I actually put it in this book. It's not in here, but I think the reason for that is that they assumed that everyone reading the book would always begin their practices with refuge. So that's the answer to that question. Let's see. And yes, there's a dedication prayer, and in fact, he mentions the dedication prayer that you're supposed to recite right in the book. He says, at the end of the session, he says on page 12, right before the words daily life, he says, then complete the period of practice with the 7-branch prayer as before, meaning as I told you earlier. And so he gives the 7-branch prayer as the dedication, and it is sufficient as a dedication. You can always add more. You can add more refuge prayers at the beginning and more dedications at the end. Let's see. Next question is, in Tonglen sending and receiving practice, is it okay to go back and forth between individuals and all sentient beings? Should we spend more time on every being? Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, he emphasizes that the practice of Tonglen should be brief. And so I think it's going to depend on your own tolerance. For some people, they need to do the practice quickly, or they get distracted and forget what they're doing, and then they end up daydreaming or doing something other than meditation. But again, if you do it in too short a format, it's not as enriched. So it is fine to go back and forth between individuals and all sentient beings. Khenpo Rinpoche said, even if you start with one being, he said, always end with all sentient beings. because he said all sentient beings will prevent you from becoming overly fixated on the same individual. In fact, he said, don't spend too much time always repeating Tonglen for the same individual and the same individual and the same individual. He said, because you could inadvertently increase your fixation on that person. So it's best to kind of start, even if you start with one person, eventually you have to end with all sentient beings. I hope that satisfied that question. Then another question. I have a question about turning gods into demons and maybe expecting applause creeping into practice very subtly. Might be best asked over the microphone. Okay, Bill.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Lama Kathy. I'll try to make this as brief as I can. So I was out walking my dog and in my neighborhood, and someone in the neighborhood owns a dog that they don't really keep very good control of. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it's a peeve of mine. And so I caught it. So the story starts off kind of good. And I'm like, oh, this is one of those things that makes me boil.
Oh yeah.
Right? Right. So you know, I low-jonged it. You know, so I did the
verb. Low-jonged it. Okay.
Low-jong it. So you know, the three objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue, and that. So, you know, and I have been finding that I'm able to disarm some situations that I'm making for myself using that. In fact, I actually, I think I shared a story with you, I think, that I actually kind of did something that shocked myself on how I turned something around that normally sends me off. But after that moment, what I found myself doing was, and it was sort of like, you know, and thinking, well, maybe there's, you know, giving consideration that maybe there are reasons that I don't know about why they can't do what they need to do with their dog. Yeah. You know, know, but in the course of doing that, the thought occurred to me, like, I'm not sure I'm not putting myself in a position of judgment over them. And now I'm sort of like, oh, look how magnanimous I am. I'm giving merciful consideration to their, you know, what I consider pardonable. Yeah. And I sort of caught that too. Right. But it seemed very subtle that it started off as being more open, but still was like there was a little bit of judgment still trying to wiggle in there. And so I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts about that, because I think in the course of that, I began to, you know, take poison food. I think I was expecting applause. So I think I hit all of them.
No, I get it. And it's okay, because we're learning these things. As you said, it's like the first time that you were able to use it and really make it work for you, and it felt good. And I think there's nothing wrong with being happy with that. And we start with really huge, gross mental afflictions. But then over time, we see that our mental afflictions are smaller and smaller and more subtle. And it's actually, that's how it's going to work. First, we'll see the big ones and we'll miss the little ones. And that's okay, because we missed them. But then slowly we'll catch them. And one of the things you can do when you feel good for having done something right, you can say, and it actually, it's in the book somewhere. I can't find it right this minute, but it basically says, may all beings do good things. See, you low-jong it. You know, not just like I did a good thing, but like, may all beings do good things, and may we all become Buddhas, you know? So you see what I'm saying? May I enter into greater practice even than this. And I think it might actually be in the additional practices because I remember one of the things he said, if you're forced to engage in something negative, think I take in on all the negativities of all beings, and may I, and then the other side is, may I enter into even greater good actions than this, and may we all become Buddhas, and so on. So I think the important thing is to find ways to work with everything, and not go into a spin about anything. Of course we're going to be making mistakes. I woke up in samsara today, so it's going to be like, it's kind of like, that's my life. I'm a samsaric being, and until Buddhahood, I'm going to keep making mistakes. And that's why Rinpoche said, even when you make a mistake out of ignorance, you can say, well, I take on the mistakes of all beings, and this mistake of mine, and may we all be free of mistakes. So again, the key is to make everything workable.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in our mind that arises in our mind that's unworkable. That's the theory behind Lojong, is that there's nothing that arises in our mind that's unworkable.
Mm-hmm. And dedicate the merit right away.
Well, as fast as you can,
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no problem. And I see that, yeah, that's a good thing to say. Hatred is a weapon of self-destruction. I remember, I think it was the Dalai Lama who said, anger only destroys its container, which I thought was a real powerful statement. Yes, and thanks for putting up the mobile Lojong practice. Thank you. And then Helder also put the place up to find it on Dropbox. So thanks for that. So I think that is the end of the questions. Does anybody else have questions?
Oh, Lama Kathy, you mentioned, I woke up in samsara. So, it's like when you wake up and it's kind of before your coffee or tea or what have you. And I've been realizing, oh yeah, this is that human condition we've been talking about. Yeah, here we are. And oh yeah, this is that the suffering of suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just a comment about that.
Yeah, no.
I just find it kind of funny. It's like, oh yeah, okay, great time to practice.
No, I get it. And I think this actually, that's very good, because you're piggybacking off of what Bill was saying, because while we're here, this kind of stuff's going to be happening. And the more of a sense of humor we can have about ourselves and say, yep, there I go. And yep, it's samsara, and yep, and so forth and so on, we can begin to make it a smaller deal and not such a big deal that we can't find it workable. Does that make sense? Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Does anyone else have questions about anything in the book? Okay, well then I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about carrying the Lojong practice into your daily life, because I feel like that's the one last thing that we have covered to a certain extent, but we haven't covered in a summary sort of way, in a way to summarize what we've learned, because there are, after all, 59 mind training slogans in the book, and even though they are grouped in the 7 points of mind training, and those 7 points are progressive, that the actual practices may still seem to be somewhat disjointed and may not hang together. So I thought I would spend a few minutes talking about that. So if we look at the practice of Lojong, it's as old as Buddhism itself. The historical Buddha Shakyamuni first explained his teachings on nonviolence, self-knowledge, and self-transformation 2,500 years ago. And in the collection of sayings called the Dhammapada, the Buddha is quoted as saying, hate never once dispelled hate, only love dispels hate. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible. And these teachings, this exact quotation was then used by Gandhi, and it was also used by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So both of these great people used this quotation as a way of talking about nonviolence as being self-transformational. And so even though what the Buddha had to say, he had to say 2,500 years ago, it still resonates because it's human. It has to do with how we feel as human beings. So the Buddha, in his teachings, he explained the value of love in his foundational teachings, the Four Noble Truths, by explaining that the suffering that we experience in this world arises from our clinging and fixation toward people, places, things, ideas, emotions, thoughts, and feelings. We have all of this clinging and fixation on these things. And the Buddha's teaching was that all of these, of all of the fixations, the greatest was self-fixation, fixating on the concept of I or me, and casting ourselves as sort of the main character in the drama of our life, and thinking that everything revolves around us and our experience. He said that of all of the fixations, self-fixation was the strongest, and in fact, was the cause of all of our mental afflictions. Self-fixation causes fear, and fear can bring on anger. It can bring on sadness. It can bring on arrogance. It can bring on jealousy, and so on. And so self-fixation being the greatest of all of these, but even this great fixation, this greatest fixation of self-fixation, it still could be remedied by meditating on love and compassion. Eventually, the Buddha said, systematized the teachings on love and compassion into the teachings on bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening, meaning awakening from the sleep of ignorance, the sleep of thinking that we are permanent, real, unchanging self, and that our world is permanent, real, and unchanging also. So awakening, bodhi means to awaken from the sleep of that ignorance, and citta means the mind that is looking to wake up, the mind that's looking to awaken in every moment. And so by practicing bodhicitta, we practice essentially the antidote to the ocean of suffering that the Buddha called samsara. So bodhicitta is the antidote to samsara suffering. And it's also the method by which ordinary beings become enlightened beings. Because if you remember, in Great Path of Awakening, near the beginning, he quotes Nagarjuna on page 5 by saying, if the rest of humanity and I wish to attain insurpassable awakening or Buddhahood, the basis for this is bodhicitta, as stable as the king of mountains, the mountain that's considered to be the center of the world. Compassion, which touches everything, and wisdom, which does not rely on duality. And then later, in the 8th century, I'm sorry, let me back up. The Nagarjuna quote talks about relative bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. Relative bodhicitta is love and compassion, which cuts through self-clinging, through love, because it is through selflessness that it is through love that one can accomplish selflessness. And then wisdom, knowing how the mind grasps at a self, and then once we understand how the mind grasps at a self, we can begin to undo that grasping on self and begin to see our mind as being greater than self. The mind is the foundation for everything that we experience. And by meditating on ultimate bodhicitta, as we spoke about at the beginning, when we spoke about the 4-part meditation on mind and its nature, that's a meditation on ultimate bodhicitta. We can begin to loosen and transform self-fixation from the inside. If we can see how our mind creates self and begin to dismantle that process, we can then experience our mind free. Our mind is free of the grasping of self. So when the mind is free from the grasping of self, then we have a panoramic awareness and view that is clarifying, purifying, and transformational. And so this is why he says in the Great Path on page 6, he said, in the middle of the first paragraph on page 6, he says, true ultimate bodhicitta, this understanding of emptiness. True ultimate bodhicitta will not arise in the course of experience for beginners, but relative bodhicitta definitely will arise if you train in it. With the development of relative bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta will be realized naturally. And then he says in the final section, he says, if you want advice on how to train in love and compassion, Shantideva, who lived in the 8th century, gives the method. The one who desires shelter quickly for themselves and for all others should use the sacred mystery of exchanging oneself for others. And so meditating on Tonglen, sending others the goodness that one would wish to have for oneself, we send all that goodness to others, and we remove from the others that one thing that we wish we did not have, which is the suffering. We remove the suffering from them and give them happiness. And by doing this, it was called by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. He said this reverses ego's logic. Reversing ego's logic by giving away that which we wish to have and then taking toward us that thing that we wish we did not have. And so in this way, we reduce ego fixation little by little by little by little. And so the remainder of the book then emphasizes the relative bodhicitta, love and compassion. So the key for us in practicing bodhicitta, the most important, is knowing our state of mind. We have to know our mind, know our thinking, see how our thinking leads us to words, how our thinking leads us to action, how our thinking leads us to habits, and so on. So if we can recognize our thoughts, that we are having thoughts and that those thoughts are creating our world, then we can recognize our mental afflictions while they are happening. We can recognize anger while it is happening. If you remember from one of the earlier classes, we talked about how difficult it is to recognize a mental affliction as a mental affliction and not be swallowed up by the story that the thought is telling us. The thought may tell us the story, oh, you are a good person who is being persecuted by those bad people. Maybe that's the story. Or maybe the story is, oh, my things are so bad, they will never get better. That's a story. But all of this is coming from the mind. And if we can recognize all of these things as coming from the mind, and then allow them to arise and disappear as they naturally can, if we don't grab them, then we can begin to get a sense of what is possible. At the beginning, we take our negative habits of thinking and we replace them with positive habits. I was describing this to someone the other day. We start with the bad habits of anger and so on, and then we replace them with the idea, I am a bodhisattva in training. I am training to be a bodhisattva. So now I'm no longer a terrible human being, you know, right? But I am a bodhisattva who is training to be a better person. And so eventually, as we train like this, we begin to see changes, just like the ones that people have described tonight, where they described feeling differently than they have ever felt before, and feeling the story being lifted from them. The story is lifted, and they can begin to work with their afflictive emotions by taking them on and saying, may I take on the three, you know, these three poisons for all sentient beings, and may I become a Buddha by doing this. So you have to recognize your mental afflictions. That's the first point. Second, you have to take action on your mental afflictions and not just believe the story. You have to see mental afflictions as mental afflictions and try your best not to believe the story, but look at the afflictive emotion itself and begin to question it. Is that person there really evil? Or is the problem not necessarily that person, but my tendency to react in anger? And to begin to question the validity of our story statements. My life is terrible, or my life is wonderful, and so on. We have to begin to question. And then, once we recognize mental affliction and take action on those mental afflictions with our remedies, we will be more in charge of our own mind. We will actually be more in charge of our own mind and slowly begin to train with harder and harder and more difficult things. We start with the little irritations, you know, the little frustrations, the little irritations, the little annoyances, and then gradually we begin to work with the tougher and tougher and tougher things. And meanwhile, we do our best to do virtuous actions and think, may I benefit other beings? May we start making offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? You know, you don't have to have an elaborate shrine to make offerings. You can have like a single image of the Buddha and put one little offering out in front of the Buddha every day. And that you do this every day, and you imagine them to be vast. So this is virtue. It's this virtuous mind state. You're cultivating a virtuous mind state. It's as though you are saturating your being with virtuous thoughts, saturating your being with virtuous thoughts, words, and actions. And by saturating your being like this, you provide the seed of Buddhahood to grow within you. We also focus on, besides focusing on doing virtuous actions, we focus on the conscious cultivation of the wish to benefit others. I spoke to you a few times ago about Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, my teacher, who said a few years ago, he said, it is artificial at first when we think, may I benefit others, because we may doubt that we can actually do it. He said, but you say it anyway. I heard someone say, fake it till you make it. That's a 12-step slogan. And it really actually is true. Because if we pretend and make believe at first, it will slowly come to believe it and slowly act on it. So we focus on cultivating consciously the wish to be of benefit to beings. This is why I try to every day think about, may I benefit this being, these beings I'm seeing, may they benefit from seeing me, and all of this. Khenpo Rinpoche said, cultivating that single wish to benefit beings is one of the strongest things you can do to increase your bodhicitta. He says when you think positive things like that, may I benefit beings, may I benefit beings, may I benefit beings, he said it starts a momentum of goodness within you. And it's like a little engine, and it just keeps turning over and turning over and turning over and turning over, that he said this momentum of goodness inside you eventually becomes self-sustaining. And you actually do become a bodhisattva in training then, and take as many things as you can as aids to your training in bodhicitta. This is why Lojong practice is considered a lifetime practice. It's not something you will practice once and then throw away, because this is the basis for all cultivation of awakened mind, is a Lojong. Because no matter what you do, you have to train your mind and recognize your faults, work with them, transform them, first in little ways, then in bigger ways. And so this is why I encourage people to do as Khenpo Rinpoche did and focus on consciously cultivating the wish to benefit others all throughout the day. When you wake in the morning, the thing I say when I wake in the morning, I set the intention for the day. I think, may whatever I do today benefit beings in some way. Even if I make mistakes, may my mistakes benefit others. Even if I make a mess of things, may that benefit others. I set my intention in the daytime. I make offerings to the shrine. I can also make incense offerings outdoors. We talked about the offering of incense as a way of offering torma to the gods and demons and dakinis and protectors. We talked about that. That is located in page 22. They talk about the 4 practices of confessing negative actions, dedicating merit, accomplishing virtuous things, giving offerings, the torma to gods and demons and dakinis and protectors. And we can actually also do a formal practice of Tonglen. It really only takes 5 minutes to 10 minutes, no more, to do the Tonglen practice that's in this pamphlet. Saying a refuge prayer, saying a Guru Yoga prayer, imagining the Guru dissolves into our heart, and then practicing shamatha or Tonglen. And so if we maintain the wish to benefit beings when we're bored, this is a good thing. And we use our remedies to overcome mental afflictions. There's a certain determination that we slowly develop. It's kind of like the determination not to be fooled by samsara. It's like my friends in 12 steps say, when you get to the point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, when you're sick and tired of the illusion and delusion, that is the time when you begin to really make the progress in your practice. You become determined that you are not going to get fooled by samsara again. You're not going to fall for it. And you're done with that. And then slowly, then that allows us to use our remedies to overcome our mental afflictions. And at the end of our day, we also recollect and regret the wrongs that we have done. And we also recollect and rejoice in the good things that we have done, so that we have equanimity, not saying that we are only bad and only ever do bad things. We have to acknowledge the good things and dedicate them and aspire to do more, and regret that which is not positive, and overcome it by confessing the fault. And then as we go to sleep, we can set our intention for the nighttime, thinking that no matter where we go in our dreams tonight, may we benefit sentient beings there. And so this is how a person would carry the Lojong practice into their everyday life. I'm going to take a quick look here. Yep, I got it. Okay. I'm going to copy this, what I just said to you, and I'm going to put it into chat. It's very long, you know, but you know, maybe what I could do, I'll do it both ways. I will put the that item in chat. Oh, it's not going to let me do that. Oh, phooey. What a shame. Okay, so that means I'll have to attach a file. Let's see if I can attach a file. Okay. No, I guess I have to find the proper title. Hang on. Oh yeah, okay. Wrap up. Okay. Wrap up. Here we go. Wrap up. Okay, I think it will go on now. Yay, it's a wrap up. It's not perfect in that it has a few mistakes in it still, but at least it gives you something to start with. And I'll also include it in the wrap up tomorrow. I'm going to change like one thing in it. As well as saying confessing faults, I'm going to say rejoice in the good. I forgot to put that in. And so if we do this, our life will actually be very constructive, and everything we do all day long will serve to increase our bodhicitta. And so I don't know, what do you guys think? Want to try it?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really helped me in my life.
I did have one more question about this, if that's okay.
Oh, sure.
So then you talk about this being, or, you know, our teachers talk about this being a lifelong practice, but then you have foundational practices, and after that, through Nundra, you get a lifelong deity practice.
Oh, yeah.
Are these companion practices, and is one more important than the other?
Yeah, bodhicitta is most important. Absolutely most important, because as Kemp Rinpoche told me, he said, if a person wants to do Mahamudra preliminaries, they have to do this first. They have to do bodhicitta practice first. Because he said, Mahamudra practice won't be successful if you don't do this. And he also said deity practice won't be important. It won't be, not important. It won't be successful if you don't do this. So he basically made it the foundation for all Vajrayana practice. He said, you have to have this on board for your Vajrayana practice to become successful. He said, if you don't thoroughly train in bodhicitta, he said, even if you do the highest Vajrayana practice, it won't produce the results. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because you can still go wrong if you're doing something for yourself only, right? So yeah, I hope that's it. Yeah. So this is foundational to everything. It's not just a companion practice. It's foundational. Got to have it. So I hope that helps. Okay. Other questions?
Hello, Kathy.
Yes.
Tracy over in Indiana. I wanted
Hi,
to. How are you?
I'm happy you're here. Yay, Tracy.
Me too. Thank you. I was just looking. So I've had these cards, you know, the Lojong cards for like, I don't know, 12 years.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've been just marinating in them. You know, they have all the slogans they've been on my shrine. Thinking about like how to integrate. Is that a useful? Because I feel like, you know, it's a little bit like word of the day I had in 4th grade, you know, where like she taught us one word, put it on the board in construction paper, and we all had to use like flamboyant over and over and over again. And so those are pretty drilled into my head. So I've tried when, you know, and I can't say like I I haven't been super studious about it every day. But to try to just read one, maybe one a day, maybe one every 3 days, and see where it applies, as sort of a practice of trying to get the slogans into my life.
Yeah, I think it's going to be different for each person. Because for me, I remember Khenpo Rinpoche taught the slogans a few years ago, and he said, yeah, a lot of people, they have the cards, they try to memorize them, but he says he says if they shuffle the cards and they're completely out of context, he said you have to see them as being progressive and that they build on each other. Each one builds on the next. And so if you can study it in such a way that when you read the slogan, you remember which of the 7 points it's in and what function it serves. And that would be really good, because then because what he said was, it's not important to memorize the slogans. What's important is to practice them. You know, to like when you feel selfish grasping, when you feel your selfish grasping, you may not remember a slogan, but you'll know, selfish grasping. I know you have fooled me many times, and you're not going to fool me this time, because I'm going to practice the sort of root slogan, which is 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue. From my point of view, if a person could memorize the script that Jamgon Khantrul gives us to do, you know, in here, I think it's 16, where he says, recognize your negative mental afflictions as soon as they arise. Let's see, that is on page 16. He says the 3 poisons continuously arise in regard to the 3 objects, things you like, things you dislike, and things you're indifferent toward. And he said, recognize these poisons as soon as they arise. Well, maybe you won't recognize them as soon as they arise, but if you recognize that you're experiencing one, then you immediately use the little script. And the little script says, may every bit of every sentient being's attachment be contained in this attachment of mine. May all sentient beings have the seed of virtue of being free from attachment. May this attachment of mind contain all their disturbing emotions, and until they attain Buddhahood, may they be free of such disturbing emotions. And then he says, aversion and other emotions are used in practice by working with them the same way. Thus, the 3 poisons become 3 limitless seeds of virtue. So I'm not going to say, don't study the cards. I'm not going to say that, because I have cards and I look at them. And I change them from time to time. But because I have sort of cheated a little, in that I have been studying this book with other people for 15 years. I've been teaching this book to other people for 15 years. I won't instantly recognize which of the 7 points it's in, but I will recognize what it's challenging me to do. Like, let me just open to one. It's don't boast. Okay, this is the one. Don't boast. Don't make a big fuss. This is from point 7. Don't make a big fuss even when you're kind to another person, because you are, in fact, just working at regarding others as more important than yourself. So basically, what I would do is not just read the slogan. I would go into the book and read the entry in the book. Yeah. That would be, to me, a really positive way of working with the cards. You know, is just say, okay, well, what is this really asking me to do? Ooh, so you mean this week, instead of using the word flamboyant, was that the word?
Yeah.
Okay, instead of using the word flamboyant in every sentence, I have to watch and see when I'm boasting. Right. You know, I have to, he said, these things should kind of hurt a little bit. It should kind of sting. Ooh, you mean I do that? Ooh. You know, so does that make sense?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, and I feel like there are definitely a few slogans that's, you know, be grateful to everyone, drive all blames into one. They come up in my karma over and over and over, you know, however. But, and Tonglen comes up because the practice of especially I've had a great time being a mom, and I always try to dedicate what I experienced there to the benefit of all beings. So I appreciate kind of, being away and being able to be here and be reminded and to pick up a lot of new things. Because I think that 3 Poisons, 3 Seeds of Virtue, I hadn't really been, it kind of gave me a, I don't know, sort of an axis to think about that I hadn't been thinking about with the card. And with I have a lot of commentaries on it. So yeah, no, it's great. Thank you.
Yeah, because Kemper Pache, he said that particular slogan was foundational, and that we needed to practice it over and over again. And so I'm thinking that might be the best way to work with the cards, is to take the time to see what it's asking you to do that you don't want to do. It's like, what is that slogan asking you to do in order to kind of poke your ego fixation a little bit, so you notice it more. Does that make sense?
Definitely. And it's probably time for me to not just go to the ones that urgent life or things are making me look at. Actually,
I'm okay with that. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Why not? Oh yeah. I mean, I bet if you want to mix it up a little bit, sure. But yeah, just keep going with the ones that kind of just keep poking you in the nose. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
No, thank you. I have time for one more. We're going to run 5 minutes over, folks. I'm sorry. And is there another one out there? Another question? Okay. Well, so we didn't get to do the quiz, so I'm sorry. We'll have to do that some other time. Besides, I hadn't figured out quite how to do it yet anyway, because I have fabulous prizes. And so we'll find a way to do it at some point in the future. But I do want to encourage everybody to do their best to take hold of this practice and make it part of their life. I've just noticed, somebody just mentioned, I'm truly amazed, at how this has enriched his practice. So thank you for sharing that. And so I'm hoping that everybody can find ways to apply this practice in their everyday life. And there is, I am going to mention in the letter, the email that I'll send to you. If you, by the way, if you did not receive an email before giving you the link for tonight's class, I think some people have been, I think there are 90 people on the list, so I think that I've got everybody covered. But if you do not, if you haven't been getting emails and you've just been using the links to get in, I would like for you to email me. And because if we do end up doing like a check-in, because I'm thinking of having a check-in meeting in October and a check-in meeting in November, it would again be on a Wednesday night. And oh, thank you. Yeah, it'll be on a Wednesday. Well, I take that back. It'll be. It might be on a Wednesday night. It might not, because there's a second book club coming. We're going to do book club. The second book club is going to be, it's going to start Wednesday, October, I think it's 21st. And it's going to be, the topic is Becoming a Bodhisattva. And it's going to have to do with the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. And it'll be 5 weeks instead of 6. And there won't be extra sessions afterward because of Thanksgiving. And it's going to also be a fundraiser for Columbus KTC. And the book is an ebook, so you don't have to buy a book. It's free. And I will send you the link to download the book if you want to do that. And so it will be 5 weeks starting in the middle of October and ending the week before Thanksgiving. So anyways, and then there'll be another book club coming in January, and that will be on Mingyur Rinpoche's book, In Love with the World. So anyway, just kind of Oh, also, by the way, I was on my Facebook page, I was telling everybody Mingyur Rinpoche is going to be teaching on the Bardo this coming Sunday morning, 9 o'clock Eastern time, 9 a.m. Eastern time, 90 minutes. A translation is available. He's teaching in English. Translation will be available in Spanish, French, and Mandarin. So, so tell your friends. They have to go to the Ocean of Merit website. I think it's actually Ocean of Merit website. So I think if you search Ocean of Merit, you can, you'll be able to get the registration. Registration is free, but they are asking donations if you can afford it. If you can't, don't worry, just get the free one. Hey, thank you, Tom. Way to go. All right, that's the spirit. So now, so I don't know what to say except I think you guys are amazing, and I want to thank you for being part of this this experiment, because I had not done a book club like this. So thank you for that. And I'm going to recite a prayer of dedication. I'm going to recite the 7 branch prayer as a dedication for our Lojong session, because that's what's called for in the book. I'm going to mute microphones just for a moment while I finish reading. With complete faith, I bow to all the victorious ones and their children who abide in the 10 directions and 3 times. I offer flowers, incense, light, perfume, food, music, and many other things, both in substance and with my imagination. I ask the noble assemblage to accept them. I confess all evil actions that I have done, influenced by the defilements, from time without beginning until now. The 5 that ripen immediately, the 10 non-virtuous actions, and many others. I rejoice in the merit of whatever virtue Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and ordinary people gather throughout the 3 times. I pray for the wheel of Dharma to be turned, the teachings of the Mahayana and Hinayana in ways suitable for the different aptitudes and motivations present in sentient beings. I ask the Buddhas not to pass into nirvana, but with great compassion and until samsara is completely empty, to look after all sentient beings who drown in this ocean of sorrow. May whatever merit I have accumulated become a seed for the enlightenment of all beings. Without delay, may I become a splendid leader for sentient beings. Now we'll sit quietly and mentally dedicate the goodness to all sentient beings, making the aspiration that all beings everywhere are freed from suffering, come to happiness, and then to Buddhahood. And coming to Buddhahood, may they emanate in all directions and benefit sentient beings endlessly. We mentally dedicate the goodness in this moment of meditation with this thought in mind. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Lama Kathy.
Thank you. Great book club.
Thank you, Lama Kathy. Thank you.
Gracias, Lama Kathy, gracias.
Yeah, gracias, gracias. Tell everybody I said hi. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Dedicate that merit now. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's like, good night, good night.
Bye, thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you.